Call to order the meeting of the Grand Forks School Board for Monday, February 10th. First item on our agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. We'd ask you to stand as able, and the flags you'll find in this corner of the room. One A, the reading of our school board meeting norms. Mr. Larson.
Thank you. The norms are: be prepared, be on time, value and respect each other, exercise thoughtful deliberation and conversation, be professional at the board table and when visiting with the general public, speak up when the norms are not being followed, advocate on behalf of students, and keep the community in mind.
Thank you. Moving on to item 2, before I seek a motion to approve the agenda, just one announcement related to the agenda. Mr. Chad Kartika, who was to lead the presentation on celebrating success from Nathan Twining Elementary and Middle School, is unavailable this evening. So that item will be moved to our February 24th meeting. So understanding that, I would seek a motion to approve the agenda with the elimination of agenda item 3 and 3A related to celebrating success. It's been moved by Dr. Hodak. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Paul. We'll take a roll call vote.
Palmasino? Yes. Anderson?
Yes.
Lunn?
Yes.
Flynn is absent. Larson?
Yes.
Manley?
Yes.
Clevin?
Yes.
Hodak?
Yes.
And Berger?
Yes.
8 yes, 0 no, 1 absent.
Motion passes. We're now moving into item 4, the public comment period. And again, my apologies if this is coming up in the agenda sooner than folks had anticipated. I do believe a message went out to most of the interested parties about the fact that we would land here about 6:02 rather than 6:47. With that said, let me introduce the public comment period. I'll share the number of comment forms I have, and if any others want to add, there'll be an opportunity for that as well. We're about to enter into the public comment period for our meeting. Although state law does not require us to hold a public comment period, we have chosen to do so because we believe it is crucial for us to hear from our community members about their concerns and issues. Having said that, please note that the board is here to listen. The public comment period is not designed to be a discussion. Accordingly, please do not expect board members to respond to your concerns or questions now. This is because we take your concerns and questions seriously and want to have sufficient time to process and research issues if need be. We will, however, respond to your questions and concerns at a future meeting or have proper staff get back to you at the appropriate time. I also want to point out that under state and federal privacy laws, we are unable to entertain any comments or questions about school district personnel. Please know, however, that we take personnel concerns very seriously. On these matters, we would ask that you would go through the appropriate administrative channels. Finally, we recognize that right now in our nation and in our community, we are polarized on a number of issues. That said, we want our school board meetings to serve as an example to our students that members of our school board and members of our community can deal with controversial issues in a civil manner and to demonstrate mutual respect for one another. In that spirit, we will insist that all speakers and members of the audience maintain civility and respect for any divergent views that others possess. We ask speakers to please address their comments to the board directly. Finally, I want to remind everyone listening that you may submit written comments to the board in lieu of speaking during the public comment period if you so choose. The board will now entertain public comments. Each individual speaker is allotted up to 3 minutes. The individual time limit will be enforced so that all members of the public who wish to speak may be allowed to do so. At this time, I believe I have 5 public comment forms. If there are others, you could bring them up now. First form I have is from Don Mord.
Good evening. I'm Dawn Mord, and I have been an educator here in Grand Forks for 31 years. And during that 31-year time, I have also served in many different capacities here in Grand Forks. I have been a second grade teacher, a third grade teacher, a fourth grade teacher, a fifth grade teacher, a sixth grade teacher, a curriculum technology partner, and I have also served on the negotiations team for the Grand Forks Education Association since 2009. And I am here tonight to implore you to really look at accepting the definition of teacher that is currently in our negotiated agreement. I can tell you that since 2009, that definition of teacher as outlined in our agreement has been discussed and agreed upon by the negotiation teams on both the board and the teacher's side on more than one occasion, the most recent being during our 2021 negotiations. At that time, we were not polarized over the definition of teacher. At that time, we all agreed that we were part of Team Grand Forks, that we were all educators here serving in the best interest of our students. And I encourage you at this point in time to make sure that we look at that definition of teacher together as a board team and a negotiations unit and talk about that together as a group. We know that everyone who works with a student in our district, whether it's in the classroom or not, is an educator. So I urge you to accept the petition for Grand Forks Education Association to negotiate on the behalf of all of our educational professionals here in Grand Forks. Thank you.
Thank you. Next I have, I'm sorry, is it Kayla Christensen? Kayla or Kala? My apologies.
President Berger and members of the school board, my name is Kayla Christensen, and I serve as a GFEA negotiator and membership chair. I'm also a 7th grade RLA teacher at Valley Middle School. While my fellow classroom teachers at Valley are the best that I've ever worked with, we could not do what we do without all of the educators in our building who support us and our students. Our colleagues do not deserve the worry of losing contract benefits, protections, and collective bargaining rights that this change of wording presents. I remind you that Article 1, Section 1E of our negotiated agreement defines a teacher as certified or professional personnel, excluding therefrom the superintendent, assistant superintendents, principals, associate principals, supervisory personnel, substitutes, and classified personnel. Certified or professional personnel. That is what the negotiated agreement currently states. Unless a staff member is in one of the 7 groups listed in the negotiated agreement, they are part of this negotiation body. Also, Article 12 of our negotiated agreement states, the provisions of each article attached hereto, except as otherwise specifically provided, shall be effective as of July 1st, 2023 to June 30th, 2025, at which time it shall automatically renew itself unless written notification to the contrary is made by either party at least 60 days prior to the anniversary date of this agreement. If such notification occurs, this agreement shall be renegotiated. Changes may be made at any time by mutual consent. Article 12 applies to Article 1. Changes to the wording of Article 1 cannot be made by one party of the negotiated agreement without consent or agreement by the other. Any changes to the negotiated agreement must happen at the negotiating table. Thank you.
Thank you. Next I have Melissa Bukup.
President Berger and the members of the school board. Many of you already know me, but my name is Melissa Bukup. I am the current government relations chair for GFEA, a negotiator and former president of GFEA, as well has been an educator in our school district for 20 years. I am here today to express my disappointment in the recommended action of rejecting the language of the letter of petition to negotiate of the Grand Forks Education Association. The language in our petition states the definition of teacher that is written in our current teacher negotiated agreement. This longstanding clause has been a key and guiding piece in our agreement for many, many years. The language that protects our certified staff that are not on the principals or directors negotiated agreements. North Dakota Century Code has not changed since our last negotiating session. Additionally, the North Dakota School Board Association is not telling anyone that they have to remove positions from the agreement. The ruling from Fargo states that the districts may consider removing these positions, but it does not inherently mean you must remove them. This year will be my 4th round as a negotiator for GFEA. Historically, when we come together for the first negotiation meetings, one of the first things the lead board negotiator has said is, I want this to be a collaborative conversation. It is a real concern that this potential move will force this next round of negotiations into a hostile and adversarial tone. Many of our certified staff on the negotiated agreement feel attacked and feel that the board will do everything in their power to not follow our teacher negotiated agreement. If there is a language that you think needs to be changed in our agreement, then you bring the proposal to the negotiation table. You don't reject our petition that has already agreed upon language and try to negotiate new language outside of negotiations. In the past 7 to 8 months, I unfortunately hear more and more from staff on how they are continually losing trust in the district. This possible move to reject the language that has been agreed to, will cause even more distrust than people already have. Who will want to come work and stay in a district where employees don't feel protected and don't feel like they have the trust in those who oversee the district? I hope that you make the decision today to gain some of that trust back. I urge you to accept our petition to negotiate as is, so that we may start this negotiation cycle off on the right foot. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Carla Hoven.
Very good. All right, Ms. Galatch, Mr. Berger, and members of the school board. My name is Carla Hoven, and I'm an instructional coach at South Middle School. I started working for the Grand Forks Public Schools in 1999 as a curriculum technology partner and now as an instructional coach. In both of these roles, I have worked hard to come alongside educators to intentionally support and partner with them. I don't think tonight is about questioning if the group of educators behind me are hard workers who support classroom educators and students, or if this group is not an important part of our schools. It's about a ruling in another city that did not really pertain to us, but now we are being grouped in with that situation. I know none of us want to be considered separate from our colleagues. And I don't believe you are questioning that we're educators. However, singling us out as a separate group is hard for me to understand. We all have current educator license, or Griffin would have called most of us and said, hey, your license has expired. While we do not have our own classrooms, we are in the classroom each day. Just last week, Tan and Bill, our counselors at South, were in the classroom all day presenting on careers. As an instructional coach, I wear many hats, from planning and supporting teachers to providing professional development, just to name a few things. Meanwhile, last week at Valley Middle School, they celebrated their instructional coach, Lisa Vocek, as the certified staff member of the quarter. I believe that's like the 3rd instructional coach to be recognized along with other classroom educators the past few years. If the intent is not to include us with our colleagues in the classroom, you are now taking away that partnership that we have worked so hard to build with them. As I read through the Supreme Court ruling, it stated, this court is not free to amend or clarify the clear language of the statute, and if changes are to be made in the statute, we leave that matter to the legislature, as is for the legislature to determine that policy, not for the courts. I understand we have long been grouped with educators who are employed primarily as a classroom teacher, as a collective bargaining group, and I understand you can decide if you want to include educators like myself in the negotiation process. In a few minutes, you will go to into executive session to hear recommendations from the school district's attorney. Ms. Bruner is asking you to reject our petition to negotiate because of educators like me and like them, who are not employed primarily as classroom teachers. I am asking at this time for you to accept us to be part of the negotiated group of educators, just as we have always been for many years. We need our legislature to revise this policy so we can work together for our students. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, I have Julia Dewhurst.
All right. My name is Julia Dewhurst. I'm the president of the swim club at the University of North Dakota. We're grateful that the Grand Forks Public School District and the Central... Oh, sorry. Hi, my name is Julia Dewhurst, and I'm the president of the swim club at UND. We are grateful that the Grand Forks Public Schools and the Central School District is considering opening their pool to the public. This would be greatly appreciated by the College Club, the USA Swimming Club, and Master Swimming, and the other clubs and organizations that use the pool. This would be an incredible opportunity, for we're an active and growing club. We currently have about 35 members, practice 4 days a week, and compete with other college clubs. We have swimmers of all backgrounds, from swimmers who are new to the sport and swimmers that compete at club nationals. Since the HISLOP is closing at the end of March, we and the other teams and groups that use the HISLOP will be out of the pool and would greatly appreciate swimming at the Central High School pool. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to item 5 on our agenda. These are superintendent's recommendations for discussion. 5A, the demographic task force update. And I believe, Dr. Glatch, you are taking the lead on this.
I am. So Dr. Brenner sends his regards. He apologizes for not being able to be in attendance this evening. So I'm just going to go from his memo and read from there, and then entertain any questions and answer them as best I can. So the memo reads as follows. First and foremost, it is important to know that Mr. Schwartz and Dr. Brenner discussed adjusting the timeline, which presently suggests a final boundary line recommendation presented to the board on March 17, 2025. Given the feedback provided by all stakeholders, he is recommending that we extend the timeline for this work with an updated and to be determined timeline for final recommendation to the school board. In other words, March 17, 2025 is a bit ambitious, given all the feedback that has already been provided. Below is an outline of possible next steps in the overall process that he will talk through, or I will talk through in his absence. So first of all, for the plan evolution, we want to make sure that we're taking into account the in-person feedback that occurred during the January 15th and 16th live conversations with our community constituents. We want to make sure that we integrate the social pinpoint survey. And just a reminder, there's an opportunity for anybody in our community to go on and make suggestions and kind of manipulate the map as far as the boundary proposals go. We want to reconnect regarding the guiding principles and boundary criteria. So Mr. Schwartz would actually like to meet with the board and kind of reconvene and look at prioritizing the principles that were put forth. And from an internal perspective, I think that's really a pivotal component of our work that needs to be done, because much of our debate and when we tweak the boundaries back and forth, at one time, it's to look at a more neighborhood school concept. The next time, we're looking at equity as far as socioeconomic balance goes. At another time, we're looking at et cetera, et cetera. So we really kind of need to prioritize the principles to move the work forward. Some options to look at how we move into the redistricting when that time comes. So do we allow siblings to trail in? Do we phase in? At different levels? How do we handle our Air Force Base students and which school they might attend and slant the attendance accordingly? So basically, next steps in district administration tasks, we need to make sure the functional capacity validation and the rationale behind that, which means the number of sections we have, the class sizes, the data is understood by everybody, okay? There have been some discrepancies there in interpretations on the data that's put forth, and we want to make sure we clarify that. We have to take a look at the realities of our high schools and how the current boundary lines might be affecting things like programmatic offerings, activities, athletics, things of that nature, and look at that as a rationale for potential change. The data differences, I already talked about that. There's some discrepancies between the internal data that we have and an external dashboard from DPI called North Dakota Insights. And really, we can't figure out why that discrepancy exists, to be honest with you. That's the honest answer. So basically, the potential to extend the timeline for the process to the board to decide on February 24th. Mr. Schwartz will be in attendance at this meeting to lead that discussion. So in the meantime, we have our next demographic task force tomorrow. That's in the evening, and we will talk about all of the things that I just mentioned in this memo. So Dr. Brenner would consider the above as high-level items that illustrate district administration and RSP are listening to the feedback and are working towards a solution that will provide the appropriate changes addressing the challenges at each grade level. Just an update for you. Any questions I can entertain?
Thank you. Remember, this is an agenda item for discussion tonight and not action. Any questions for Dr. Glatch? Dr. Lund?
Just a comment and a question. Clearly, none of the other males on the school board got the memo from Mr. Anderson and I to wear the same shirts. So next time you got to look at your emails. So we all wear the same shirts. So
We're going to do a who wore better at the end of this. Yeah.
I'm glad we didn't show up at prom with the same clothes on. So the question is, and I didn't see it in here, we don't have a new timeline as far as when this would come back to the board yet. And I assume the answer is going to be yes. Do we have a time frame that changes will be not made in the 25-26 school year, that we're going to run out of time, and this will be something that would start in 26-27?
Great question. So I believe it's an accurate representation that we never really intended the redistricting to occur as soon as next school year. We are always looking at the ensuing school year as the possible first date. So we should have plenty of time to advertise and inform our constituents.
Other questions for Dr. Glatch? Mr. Palmasino?
Yeah, I just have a question. You know, every couple of years we have to have public forum that is due. Is this something that we could, since the timeline is looking down the road to 26, you know, in that year, to put together a public forum the first part of next year in which we could sit down with people in classrooms like we've done in the past and get all the facts out, you know, so we aren't, you know, because a lot of misinformation flies all over when rumors go from rumors to rumors. So we could incorporate that, and we're always looking for a subject for the public forum, and this might be one of the biggest ones that Grand Forks is going to face for a while.
Sure, I think we can take that into advisement. I think the con of that is if we're looking at making a change, you know, right now the pushes and pulls on our building are real. So that would just prolong that timeline, but to your point, it would allow for a greater constituency to weigh in. So we'll take that under advisement.
And I don't know if May is too early to put something like that together, but if you could do it before the end of the school year, we could still pull that off. And as long as, you know, that would take care of the forum that we're supposed to have next year, if we could have that at that time.
Other questions for Dr. Glatch? Dr. Hodak?
Yes, I was very appreciative of this memorandum that came out from the administrative team. I heard everything from a lot of people in the public about these various things that are in that plan evolution, as well as district administration tasks. In fact, to the board, I had 21 people contact me personally to let me know their concerns. And that's why I do feel that when I read this, I was very much encouraged. I would like to say that I am disappointed with some of the data, and even Catherine, with what you're saying about why the dashboard data doesn't, with that. But I know that with technology, with entry of information and everything else, but I do think that that's critical, that when we make an informed decision, that we have the exact data that is available and that is out there. I am excited about knowing that Mr. Schwartz will reconnect with us as a board so that we can ask about some of the things on how the process has been followed as well, too. I think the one that continues to come up when I run into people and everything else is still the who selected the task force, the demographic task force, and not necessarily who, but how those people were selected, because there's concern about equal representation. So were parents put on that have children currently in school? And so I think that was, has been raised as well too. So ultimately I really don't have a question. I just am really appreciative of extending the timeline. I completely agree with what Bill has said about having a public forum so that our public can hear from us. And I do believe that that's something that we should be able, with all the information we have currently, that we could put together and such. But again, I applaud the team coming up with this, so thank you.
Others? Mr. Clevin?
On the academic predictions, like the predictions of academic performance of each of the proposed districts, is the method of assessing that, has that been consistent over a number of years? In other words, same tools to come up with that are the same tools we used prior. And Catherine, you seem confused by the phrasing of my question. So
I am.
I'll apologize, I stumble over my words. But in the proposal, well, I won't even call it proposal. In the first round of information shared for discussion, there was predicted academic outcomes for each of the proposed schools. It was like a number like 2.06, 2.03. It was on a scale of 1 to 3.
You're discussing the, it's more of the demographic.
Correct.
Yes.
Correct.
Yeah, that's not about the academic outcomes. That was more about the socioeconomic capacity of any given neighborhood region.
Well, I thought there was an academic component in there, but I'll rephrase to be more broad and more general. That scale, has that been the same scale used in previous discussions, and is that a consistent metric?
Great question. So that scale, if we're talking about the same indicator, is one that has been called into question from the data side. So we have what's called the North Dakota Insights Dashboard that reports out on socioeconomic demographics, ethnicity, things of that nature, different student groups, broken down by school, area, et cetera, et cetera. And that seems to be a bit in competition with the metric that you're describing. I think that's one of the things we really need to have our constituents better understand. My understanding of RSP's data is that they take in other considerations besides just free and reduced lunch rates. They look at the, for example, a household income in that geographical area, what a house is worth, things of that nature to get to that overall metric. But there seems to be a discrepancy between that and what we see as kids in school. So if we're talking about the same indicator, Jay, I think that's one of the components that we really need to make sure that our constituents understand.
I don't think we are. I'll come back with a better question. I
Okay.
got to go back, look at paperwork, look at materials.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions for Dr. Glatch? Yep, Ms. Flynn?
When I was looking on what do we have to work on still, I know it's probably not an all-inclusive list, but one thing that I noticed that was missing from there was potential effects to access through busing. So as we're moving things and shifting things, how are our busing routes changing? Are we potentially adding or potentially taking away? Are we potentially seeing an uptick in those, especially for the boundaries that might draw a little farther away from individuals' homes? So just wondering if our busing company and Branded could help possibly give us some data to understand the numbers or possible projections that way. And then, of course, I think that probably would have some sort of fiscal impact in understanding that a little more. That was another question that I asked is, besides the cost of the consultant or using the consultant in the extra capacity, are there any fiscal impacts associated with moving boundary lines? So.
Other questions? Okay, thank you for that. We'll move on to 5B, Government Affairs Committee report. Ms. Flynn, I believe you chaired this. Do you want to lead off here? And then perhaps, I know, Brandon, you were there as well, and Dr. Glotch, you were there, but please go ahead.
Sure. We met on February 6th. There were no legislators present at this meeting, but we went through an extensive list of bills that were currently in hearings or had gone through hearings. So we talked about a variety of things that could impact students and the way we do things in Grand Forks Public Schools. We heard from some of the district administrators on their presence in Bismarck and testifying on certain bills and how it might affect things at Grand Forks Public Schools. There's a list of key legislative actions on the back here. What we get every week from school board, the North Dakota School Board Association, and then the district gets from NDCEL is very extensive. They follow along very closely. We've gotten emails from GFEA, we've gotten emails from other individuals on certain laws or legislations that are being proposed. And then we also talked about the timeline of our next meetings, especially during the crossover. So all of the legislative actions that we discussed are there for you to read. I won't go over those. We also talked about kind of circling back with the legislators from Grand Forks to determine if there's a better time, because it would be nice to meet with them or have some of our local legislation present to kind of hear our thoughts about some things as well. So, and then lastly, I made an ask of Dr. Brenner to put together sort of a cheat sheet for board members on testifying. If we send in a statement, how do we do it? What do we do? Just because everyone has different levels of experience in doing that. So Dr. Brenner said that he and administration would work on that for board members. So,
Others who were at that meeting wish to add or clarify anything? Okay, questions for Ms. Flynn or this committee from board members? All right. We'll move on to 6A. At this time, I would ask for a motion to hold an executive session pursuant to North Dakota Century Code 44-04-19.1, 2, 5, 9, and North Dakota Century Code 44-04-19.2 for attorney consultation to receive the attorney's advice and guidance on legal risks, strengths, and weaknesses of an action which, if held in public, would have an adverse fiscal effect on the school district, and for negotiation strategy related to descriptions of negotiating units.
Moved.
It's been moved by Dr. Lund. Is there a second?
Second.
And a second by Mr. Clevin. We'll take a roll call vote.
Manley,
Yes.
Lund,
Yes.
Larson,
Yes.
Palmasino,
Yes.
Hodak,
Yes.
Clevin,
Yes.
Flynn,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Berger,
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no, 0 absent.
Motion passes. So at this point, Grand Forks Public Schools board members are going to convene an executive session next door. So I don't believe the public has to leave or move. We do have in the minutes that we've given approximately 20 minutes for this session. Really don't know where we're going to land here, but we will come back in and reconvene the open portion of the meeting. So again, a best guess would be 6:55, but I really can't hold the session to that length of time. It will take as long as it takes. The minutes will show that the executive session was adjourned at 7:29 PM. We've all convened back together in the meeting room. We are now back in open session. The next item on our agenda is 6B, consideration of petition for recognition of appropriate negotiating unit from the Grand Forks Education Association. I would seek a motion to either accept or reject the proposed negotiating unit described in the petition. Mr. Clevin?
I'll make a motion to accept.
It's been moved by Mr. Clevin to accept the proposed negotiating unit described in the petition. Is there a second? It's been seconded by Mr. Manley. Any discussion? Ms. Flynn?
Sorry, I had to run to the bathroom. I have been on the negotiating team for the board for 4 cycles now, I think, since 2016. And we have had some really good conversations with the GFEA group. We've had some really tough conversations. And every year, we've been able to work through compromises on some things and understand a little bit more about each other's sides. And I think that we can work with GFEA to help them understand the board's perspective and hear them a little bit further. I think it would be worth the board bringing this to the negotiating table for language, but I don't know that personally I'm in favor of changing anything now. So I plan to vote in favor of accepting their petition, but I do think that it would be very important for us to have conversations at the board table and to learn more about each side. And I strongly would ask the board to consider that as the intent of looking at this language, looking at these other positions. We want to recruit all positions, and we want to do what's best for the kids. And so the ability to be able to have some flexibility in doing that, I think we can figure out with the teachers. So that's what I have to say.
Thank you. Other thoughts, questions, conversation from board members? Dr. Hodak?
And on my opinion here, first of all, I have to say that I am very disappointed in North Dakota Unite, the North Dakota Educational Leadership Council, and the North Dakota School Boards Association, as well as ESPB and the Department of Public Instruction, for not handling this and this being dropped on our backs. Because I want to make sure that every person is represented to the best that they can be represented. And when I know that there have been some people that have said, well, GFEA represents us even though I didn't have a say, or they don't represent, or I have to get my insurance from another national organization or anything else. That causes me a lot of concern about how they are represented, this other group of people out there. So I'm not certain how I will vote until the motion goes forward and such, but I do know that I believe the GFEA has to be engaged and involved with all of those people so that they do not feel left out, and so that we can honor and recognize that, yes, they want to be a part of GFEA. Because I know after 40-some years in education and having done this, that there are teachers that do not believe in what GFEA or the North Dakota Unite does represent when they do. So I know that that is out there, and I'm just trying to make the best decision that is best for all and that will equally represent the best education for our students.
Thank you. Others? Dr. Lund?
I too am going to support this motion, and I'll put my other hat on, the medical hat. I'm tired of the medical hat people stealing our medically oriented people in the school district, so we have to look at compensation for those people that can go out into health systems and elsewhere and get paid a lot more money. We've got to figure out how we take care of that group, and I agree with Amber. I have confidence in both negotiating teams being able to work through some of that.
Others? I have just one thought to add, and that is we're really talking about this board's decision for this bargaining unit for this round of negotiations. I too look forward to having those conversations between the board's negotiating team and GFEA's negotiating team. There's no telling what a board 2 years from now will do or would do, depending on the composition of that board. So it really behooves all of us to land somewhere we're comfortable with moving forward. I believe we can do the work. We just have to do the work. Others? There's a motion on the floor to accept the proposed negotiating unit described in the petition. And we'll take a roll call vote.
Larson?
Yes.
Palmasino?
Yes.
Clevin?
Yes.
Lund?
Yes.
Manley?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
Hodak?
No.
Flynn?
Yes.
Berger?
Yes.
8 yes, 1 no, 0 absent.
Motion passes. The next item on our agenda is consideration of petition for recognition of appropriate negotiating unit, Grand Forks Principals Association. I would seek a motion to either accept or reject the proposed negotiating unit described in this petition.
I move to accept.
It's been moved by Mr. Clevin to accept the proposed negotiating unit described in the petition. Is there a second? By Mr. Manley. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll take a roll call vote.
Clevin?
Yes.
Manley?
Yes.
Hodak?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
Flynn?
Yes.
Larson?
Yes.
Lund?
Yes.
Palmasino?
Yes.
Berger?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no, 0 absent.
Motion passes. 6D, consideration of petition for recognition of appropriate negotiating unit, Grand Forks Directors Association. I would seek a motion to either accept or reject the proposed negotiating unit described in this petition. It's been moved by Mr. Anderson. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Clevin, any discussion? We'll take a roll call vote.
Anderson?
Yes.
Flynn?
Yes.
Hodak?
Yes.
Clevin?
Yes.
Larson?
Yes.
Lund?
Yes.
Manley?
Yes.
Palmasino?
Yes.
Berger?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no, 0 absent.
Motion passes. Item 6E is our consent agenda. I would seek a motion to approve the consent agenda as it states in your packet. It's been moved by Dr. Lund. Is there a second? Mr. Manley. We'll take a roll call vote.
Anderson?
Yes.
Hodak?
Yes.
Flynn?
Yes.
Manley?
Yes.
Lund?
Yes.
Palmasino? Larson?
Yes.
Clevin?
Yes.
Berger?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no, 0 absent.
Motion passes. 6F, consideration of 2025-2026 Joint Powers Agreement between Grand Forks Air Force Base Public School District Number 140 and Grand Forks Public School District Number 1 for educational services. I chaired this meeting, so I'll do my best to give you a bit of an overview, and then I would entertain any comments from others. We met on February 5th of last week, and these recommended changes are updating dates and some minor language changes. I believe Brandon could help us understand some of the current practice as well as some of the things that are coming down the way. We're in a bit of a holding pattern as it relates to some of the funding formula pieces. So I'll defer to you to hopefully illuminate that for the whole board, please.
President Berger, members of the board, I'm happy to do so. Again, largely the changes that were made here are just change of terms, which is traditionally what we've seen in this document. It has been in the same place for years. There was just a little bit, it hadn't been reviewed for a while, so we got in front of our attorney, and then when we started talking through the functionality of it, the attorney suggested we include a couple things, including on page 1 or Article 4.1, there's an additional sentence about District 140 adopts governing policies of District 1. This has been the practice and has been followed for quite some time. It just needed to be reflected here in the JPA. Another example would be clarification on Article 4.3 that really it is District 1 who's employing the superintendent, but then administrative services are being provided to District 140. So that same decision, it kind of gets reflected here in 4.5 in reflecting that each board will have representation, or District 140 will have representation on District 1's committees that are listed there, and what was included now is the Superintendent Evaluation Committee, which certainly District 140 has had a voice on. Further clarifications in Article 5 that just points out, adds a little more detail to that District 140's responsibilities in this agreement, including the construction projects at District 140, as well as the maintenance of the buildings. We already account for those expenses against District 140, so it better reflects this. Operational costs that support the board, still the case, and it already reflects a portion of the superintendent's salary as well as the business manager's salary. And this is reflected here in wording, and also adds in other administrative salaries and resources, for example, our executive secretary. And lastly, I'll just point out 7.1, Article 7.1, that each district will obtain, carry, furnish general liability policy with adequate amounts. That's currently the case. We renew our insurance at the same time each year, and this just better reflects it. So those are largely the changes here. Some of what President Berger mentioned, that this arrangement could change, and what would bring upon that change is the new Twining school building really could want to bolster this agreement to make sure that when District 140 enters into a 20-year debt service agreement, that this is reflected on how that relationship is articulated here. So more will come in some time, but that project won't really be underway during this term of contract through next school year.
Anything to add, Mr. Anderson, from that committee? Any questions for this committee from board members? As you can see in the memo, this got unanimous approval at the committee level. The committee and administrative recommendation is to approve the 2025-2026 Joint Powers Agreement between Grand Forks Air Force Base Public School District Number 140 and Grand Forks Public School District Number 1 as presented. I would seek that motion. Mr. Clevin, a second by Mr. Palmasino. Any discussion?
Thanks for the work.
Thank you. Any other discussion? We'll take a roll call vote.
Lund,
Yes.
Flynn, Palmasino,
Yes.
Larson,
Yes.
Clevin,
Yes.
Hodak,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Manley,
Yes.
Berger,
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no, 0 absent.
Motion passes. Now to 6G, the first item under 6G, consideration. I have skipped one. G, Finance Committee report will be first. Mr. Palmasino, do you want to lead this off?
Yeah, if you look at the memo, I'm going to talk a little bit about what the committee did, and then I believe Jonathan is going to come up and give you some details if there's any questions, and then Brandon will jump in, or somewhat in that order. But we had two bids that have come in on Winship and on Lewis and Clark's enhancement for safety and security. They both include additions to the building. Winship's will be on the northwest side of the building, and then Lewis and Clark will also be on the northwest side of their building on the lower end of Lewis and Clark. So it'll be on the drive-in. If you haven't been to Lewis and Clark lately, there's a drive-in pass. So that's where those two additions are. And we accepted, or as a board made a recommendation, Finance Committee, to accept both prices. And they'll be follow the guidelines that we're doing on Tier 1 of the safety and security, and that was a total of about $18 million, which we passed on the bond issue. The price for the let me see, I think it was wind chip project was 14 million, or $1,492,715, and Lewis and Clark was $1,208,784. And as a group, we asked it to do the bid or the approval together, but at any time, if you want to pull out one, we could always do that if you wanted to. So I don't know, Jonathan, if you have more of a report on those two that you'd like to give?
Thank you, Mr. Palomacino. As many of you noticed in the board packet, both of these came in slightly above where we had projected them to come in. That has been largely driven by electrical costs. And within that, low voltage electrical costs, which are proprietary to our fire and communication systems. So we just didn't properly scope for those specific pieces, which, because they're proprietary, we only have one option to work with our current systems in place. So outside of that, I would stand for any questions. I would clarify if needed on these two projects or the safety and security project as a whole.
Any questions for this committee or to Mr. Elwain? Mr. Clevin.
I'll try the microphone today. The costs are a little bit higher than estimated.
Yes.
But less than 10%, and it's a pretty good bid. But I have a question regarding project costs that are a contingency as a percent of construction cost. I assume CM's got fees that are a percent of construction and the AE firms, correct?
The CM will carry that. As soon as we accept the GMP, we will not have a design contingency anymore. But they will carry a percentage contingency on that. I know Chad's here. I believe it's 5%, but I'm not 100% sure.
Well, and the question more is related to basic fees for service. Are any of them tied as a percent of construction cost? Primarily, I'll just cut right to the first that's most consistent, the architects and engineers fees.
Yes, the architects and engineers fees. We are negotiating them project by project or as groups of projects. I don't know if Brandon wants to kind of chime in here.
I do understand that, but the point I'm trying to make is the cost of the work came in a little bit higher, but it's not an extension of scope or an increase of scope. And the contract is what it is. We can't change it. But I think going forward, trying to kind of lock in a fixed fee earlier so we're not paying extra money for just market forces that cause the cost to go up. You know, it's just a point of comment. I'm certainly going to approve any motion to accept these because this is good work from the construction team and the AE firm. So just a point going forward for consideration.
I appreciate your comment. We will look into that and we will report back.
Thank you.
Other questions? I just have one comment in case people haven't heard this before. When we talk about Tier 1, this isn't necessarily Tier 1 in order of importance or even order of magnitude. It's just we have them out in different construction seasons. Is that a fair way to say it? We just, sometimes we hear this language and we might think we've prioritized, but this might just be, there are good reasons behind it. If you just illuminate those for just a moment.
Yes, I'd be happy to do so. So we did break them out into tiers as far as what we thought the need was based on our architectural engineering firm as well as a special consultant who came in and made reports that we reported on the board to last year for those of you that were here. So we broke those into different tiers on where the need was the highest. So we coupled that with what the highest needs and then which projects were feasible, and then also keeping in mind prices are going to go up. So if we can tackle our highest cost projects first, well, we're going to save money in the back end. So that's kind of how we prioritized which projects to go forward with.
Great. Thank you. Other questions, Mr. Palmacino?
I think one other point is that Lake Agassiz bids have been received and are being looked at by the GM, and then also Schrader is coming in, I believe, this week with their prices. So it'll be an ongoing thing of getting as many as they can tackle this year.
Any other questions? Ms. Flynn?
Can Brandon remind the board and the public about where these funds are coming from? Like, are we kind of under what we had gone to the public with type thing?
President Berger, Board Member Flynn, I'm happy to answer that question. So this is a part of the May 2023 referendum that was passed, $79 million. There were three components to that project, or that question to the public: Valley Middle School construction, central kitchen construction, and then safety and security upgrades across the district. Largely, and we'll give probably more update here, but largely those projects are going really well. Valley Middle School is really tracking ahead of budget. Central kitchen just wrapped up under budget. In safety and security, you heard that $18 million number that Board Member Palmasino put out there. That is our target. And when you look at the third attachment associated with this part of the Finance Committee, it kind of puts that in context, because we don't want to lose our eye on the prize of the budget for this one. And so what you'll see there is it's tracking about $18.6 million, so just over that budget, but it's really early yet. So we've had just these few projects get bid. Red River was the first of those, and it came under budget. We just talked through Lewis and Clark and Winship just a little bit over, and Lake Agassiz is already promising, and the bids are in and they're working through those, but to be under budget. In addition, there's contingencies built in there, and there's even some assumptions on other buildings that are conservative in nature. So I'd say we're tracking right on budget with this as well, as far as the referendum money goes.
Other questions? Dr. Lund?
I don't have a question, but I would move approval of the guaranteed maximum price for both Lewis and Clark and Winship, as outlined in the memo.
So there's a motion on the floor to approve both of these guaranteed maximum price and total project prices as outlined in the memo. I can read them if necessary. Is there a second? Second by Dr. Hodek. Again, just so we know the motion on the floor, we're approving, assuming it passes, the motion is the GMP of 1.492 and a total project of 1.739 for Lewis and Clark, and 1.208, total project of 1.420 million for Winship. That's the motion on the floor, and a second. Is there any discussion? I see a microphone on for Mr. Palmasino. Any further discussion? Take a roll call vote.
Hodak?
Yes.
Larson?
Yes.
Manley?
Yes.
Clevin?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
Flynn?
Yes.
Palmasino?
Yes.
Lund?
Yes.
Berger?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no, 0 absent.
Motion passes. 6G2, consideration of change orders 7 and 8 for Valley Middle School.
I think I'll let Jonathan, let him walk through
There
it,
we go.
because he can explain.
Thank you.
Thank you, President Berger. In front of you have two change orders, CPR 07 and 08. We'll just start with 07 and I'll kind of talk you through it. This was a $106,000 and $3 change order, which added a combi oven to the kitchen in Valley Middle School. We made this adjustment to align it better with other middle schools in the district. This would have been the only middle school that did not have 3 combi ovens. So we added this one, and you'll see it's just the addition of the oven, which was the major expense in this, which was around $50,000. And then just changing the layout and our electrical costs in order to feed that oven. I would stand for any questions at this time.
Any questions related to CPR 07? This would be the memo, page 8 of this line item in your electronic packet. Any questions for Mr. Elwine? Mr. Clevin?
So this is a owner-directed change?
Correct. While we were trying to trim down our scope in order to meet budget, this was one thing we removed, and because things came in so favorably, we've been adding things back in, and this is one of those.
Other questions? The administrative recommendation is to approve this change order at a cost of $106,003. I would seek a motion to approve. It's been moved by Mr. Palmasino. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Manley. Any discussion? Take a roll call vote.
Flynn?
Yes.
Clevin?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
Hodak?
Yes.
Palmasino?
Yes.
Lund?
Yes.
Manley,
Yes.
Larson,
Yes.
Berger,
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no, 0 absent.
Motion passes. Still on 6G2, this would now be change order 8 for Valley Middle School. Mr. Elwine?
Thank you, President Berger. So for change order 8, this was a largely user-directed change order. This was asked by both administration and those who would be using these spaces. We'll start out with number 1, layout changes in the media tech area. Essentially, we changed the functionality of that space from just being a say, roll-up door where people brought in and took out tech items to more an open space. So we changed the layout with that. And as well as a storage room, so it allowed someone to be sitting out in a hallway and to have supervisory capability down 2 hallways. It was in my opinion, a good change, and it will be good for our end users. Layout and installation changes in the admin area. This was just a little small shift of the principal and vice principal rooms in order to better align with the window, as well as making a conference room slightly smaller, and then additions of soundproofing insulation as asked for by those administrators. Change in layout in the fax classroom is similar because we had an earlier change in an exterior framing. We had to adjust that room to again better align with the windows. And then insulation changes in the music area. This was asked largely, we were going to move the day treatment room from upstairs, downstairs next to the music suite. We worked with the admin, and the admin worked with upper admin, Dr. Brenner, Dr. Galach, to make sure that that would work with the current schedule. And this will allow the day treatment room to be more segregated, as well as adding in extra insulation to provide more soundproofing in that area. And then number 5 is just the electrical and mechanical changes related to all of this subset of changes. Total cost is $88,245, and I would stand for any questions at this point.
Questions for Mr. Elwine? It's been a motion to approve change order 8 at a cost of $88,245. Is there a second? A second by Mr. Clevin. Any discussion? We'll take a roll call vote.
Palmasino,
Yes.
Manley,
Yes.
Lund,
Yes.
Larson,
Yes.
Kleben,
Yes.
Hodak,
Yes.
Flynn, Anderson,
Yes.
Berger,
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no, 0 absent.
Motion carries. We're now on to 6G3, consideration of contractor to recommission Grand Forks Central Pool. Also, Mr. Elwine.
Thank you again, President Berger. So with the Hislop coming offline this spring, we've worked with community groups and explored many options, and we decided that our best option was to recommission the pool at Central High School. So we put out a request for proposals to get that pool back in working order. So we received essentially 4 proposals from 2 firms. We allowed them to submit proposals that included either replacing or recommissioning existing equipment. So as you can see on the memo, we had 2 from Horizon Pool and 2 from Associated Pool Builders. And for Horizon Pool, we had a replacement with a new sand filter system, a replacement with a new regenerative media system, and from Associated, we had a replacement with cartridge or recommissioning of our current equipment. I worked with Mr. Baumbach as well as Brian Strom of UND, formerly of UND, and Lisa Rolfstad, of Choice Fitness, and talked through these different options, and we came in agreement that the best option would be the regenerative media filter. So our administrative recommendation is to approve Horizon Pool Supply's regenerative media proposal at a cost of $169,550 to the building fund. I'll stand for any questions.
Questions for Mr. Elwine? Oh, a comment first from Mr. Baumbach.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity. President Berger, members of the board, I've had the opportunity to work with Mr. Elwine and a number of different groups I'll point out in a second, and I just wanted to kind of celebrate this conversation. There's been a lot of work that's gone into this. When bricks were popping off the building before due to some of the issues involved with that pool, and it was initially shut down, we looked at different estimates of what it might cost, and we really saw a wide range, as much as multiple millions of dollars to really fix that pool properly. Other alternatives that were explored was community partnerships, even broader than our community, with the Air Force Base and Crookston pools. And we looked at, okay, if we don't have the pool here, with Hislop coming down offline, where would we swim? Where would we dive? And although those were options, they became challenging as Crookston changed direction with their own pool. And even, they certainly weren't without costs associated. To drive, to have the extra time, to think about the burden even on those students making those trips. But where we continued to explore was within our community and our community partnerships. So we worked with the groups most affected, not just the students that were swimming and diving, but our community groups, who you might see represented here in the audience, our Wahoos, our Dakota Masters, Safe Kids and beyond. And so when administration really began to consider this idea of bringing the pool back online to make sure there wasn't going to be a gap for our swimmers, we realized the importance of making sure there wouldn't be a gap for the community. We didn't want to let a couple of years slip by where students weren't getting the swim lessons that they needed and beyond. There are other partners in the community, but just not enough water. So it has been a community approach from the start, and I would say that has helped even in the economical nature of this fix. It's no longer millions of dollars. What we can do here with a lot fewer dollars to bring this pool online and operate for it short term is significant. One, those community groups will help facilitate swim lessons, et cetera, and access to the facility, and they will share in the operational costs, which is a tremendous partnership with them. Further, the regenerative filter you talked about, it was in key consideration of knowing what the marketability of that product would be when the pool gets turned off. What do we do with that? We don't want to throw good money after bad. We want to make sure it's repurposed, and we even see the possible partnership with the Park District of seeing if that could fit at a Riverside pool, which we know is coming. So we've really done some due diligence to plan ahead and make this thrifty and really a community approach. So lastly, I would just say thanks to all those community partners, starting with UND and what the Hislop has done for the community for so many years, to the city and the Park District for what it will do for all the coming years with the All True Sports Complex. And then all of these key partners who have come through, walked the facility with us, and helped us make sure there wasn't a gap in the community. So thank you for letting me underscore those points.
Questions for Mr. Elwine or Mr. Baumbach? Dr. Lund.
I too would want to echo the great community support. That it's a great partnership that shows how it can work when you get a group of interested people together with the same goal. My one quick, and Brandon kind of teased it a little bit, but the intent of this is to be used for 2 or 3 years and then will be decommissioned once the All True complex is up and running. Am I correct?
Correct, yeah. We see this as a stopgap solution, not a long-term solution, simply because of how the humidity and the air damaged the building before. We have some plans to mitigate that, but it's not a, say, long-term 5-10-year plan.
Other questions? Yes, Mr. Manley.
We went on the tour of that building recently. Is there a way to keep the general public in a certain area or out of certain areas that we don't want them in? Because we took that path in and it was pretty wide open.
Yes, actually there is. The way the doors are currently set up, I did a walkthrough just to make sure, and even without having to make any changes to the building, we can segregate that pool from the rest of the building. It will just have to involve extra checks by our custodial staff to make sure doors are locked.
Other questions? Ms. Flynn?
I have like 6 questions. So, I didn't see a pool cover on the sheet. What's the plan for covering the pool?
Correct. We will be ordering a pool cover, but as that is not a part of a project or a piece that is fastened to the building, it's not eligible for building fund dollars.
Okay. Do we know how much that will cost?
Yes, approximately $23,000.
Okay. Thank you. And who's responsible for maintenance of the pool?
We will be responsible for maintenance of the pool. We are in talks with someone to essentially run the pool day by day from an operational standpoint, not necessarily from a scheduling standpoint, but we will be responsible for upkeep.
So would that be an additional position that would be hired potentially?
I'd love to talk about this because it's another one of these community support efforts. Brian Strom's name was mentioned before. He used to run UND's Hislop facility and is now in retirement. And he too is invested in seeing that there isn't a gap where this community doesn't have enough water for all of its users. And so he is willing to monitor the pool and be involved on a contract basis. And I can tell you, it's really a lot less than we anticipated it would cost. And I think that just says a lot about how invested he is in that.
Okay. Who would be responsible for supervising the pool for safety? So when community groups are using it, are we potentially doing an MOU where they have, who covers the insurance, et cetera?
Yeah, and we're in conversations to that contract. We had our attorney draft a contract, and then working with our community users are responding to that. We're still working out the details and exactly that, but we've covered these subjects, and so certainly insurance coverage has been agreed to. These groups already carry their own insurance. That isn't a problem. There's lifeguard responsibilities when these user groups are in there. There's other life-saving measures that need to be considered. You think about the buoy on the wall and the AEDs and such, and that's where Grand Forks Public Schools has agreed to provide those.
Okay. Someone mentioned in the public comments that UND's pool is going offline in March 2025. I thought it was this summer.
Yeah, right now it's March.
Okay.
We haven't had an update on that to the contrary, so there will be a small gap. So our community groups have been talking with the Parks District, and we have been talking with the Parks District to hopefully try bridge that small gap until we get back online. Additionally, we're trying to find if there's any avenues to accelerate this project at all.
Okay. And then swim meets. I know that there's like the pool and the pool area are a bit smaller than like UND where they had some before. Are we looking at what we're going to do for like meets? Is there going to be limited meets? How does that work?
I don't know if we're the very best people to answer that. Certainly our activities director, Mike Biermeyer, would be the best, and Dr. Glatch, if you want to jump in. But, largely they'll operate like they did prior to, we were here when the pool was operating. And so I think it was really much more like duels than meets, and I'm outside of my swim lane on this one, so I can, it just came to me.
You're sinking.
Yeah.
You got a thumbs up from Dr. Glatch, so I think you covered it well, despite my commentary.
My other question is, so we talked about ongoing costs. So there's potentially going to be a contract for someone. Are we going to have higher utilities for water? Are we going to have pool chemicals that we need to buy? Do we have an idea of what the scope of the operational costs are going to be outside just the $169,000? I'll also mention that I have a lot of questions about this. One, because I was pretty ill that night and couldn't come. Two, I am very surprised at the amount of money that it cost being so low compared to what I thought it was going to be. So I very much support this, but I want to make sure that the board is having these conversations. So my last two questions are, do we have a scope of what we understand the operational costs to be? And then do we have an idea of what possible income revenue is going to be and how that might offset those operational costs?
Yeah, I can take the first piece and I'll let Brandon take the second. So annual operation, I've got some estimates in here. I'm carrying a $43,000 line item for filters, energy, water, testing, labor, and chemical, as well as a $12,500 line item for maintenance, anything that might come up. So essentially about $55,000 a year to operate.
Okay.
And as far as that agreement goes, again, working through the contract, I feel like those conversations have been very positive, and we've really largely agreed to a split that's reflective of the usage. So when we look at the usage, actually, Grand Forks Public Schools swimmers would be in the minority of this, to the tune of 80% to 20%. And so we've kind of taken that principle and applied it to those operating costs, and we've already come to an agreement to that in spirit. I mean, we're just working through the final pieces, but I would say, the Wahoo's group, which is the actual entity we'd be contracted with, and reflective of all the other groups, said We think that's reasonable in the first year, knowing that we may not get the pool open in time to really gather all of the revenues they could collect. So they hope to do more in future years. So we're not pinning them down on that. It just feels like a real great partnership to make this work.
Thank you.
Other questions? Mr. Palmasino.
I think just to answer a little bit, Amber, on the difference between $300,000-400,000 and $1 or $2 million, I think when we looked at it originally, we were looking long-term, and we were looking at taking walls down and putting up new walls with inside the pool. I think people have to understand the pool will be what it was. It'll look just like our tour when we walk through it. It'll be like that with the lunchroom tables out of there, and then filled with water, but there'll be less. The cover will take care of the humidity to a point. But if we were going to do a long-term, then you would have had to replace walls and do that so they can absorb that humidity a long-term. So that's why the price went way down.
I feel like I need to clarify the lunch table piece. So John Strandell was explaining that during COVID, they needed more tables spread further apart to get everyone, when they returned to in-person instruction. And then this decommissioned pool became the storage for Central's excess lunch tables, and then storage for the district's excess lunch tables. It's not like we're planning an additional cafeteria, but there must be a plan for where they're going. You don't have to illuminate that now. I trust there's a plan. Other questions for Mr. Clevin?
Just a point of comment, the extra $9,000 or so for the regenerative media is totally worth the money. That's the best choice here. So in that, I'm going to strongly concur with the recommendation of the building committee.
Any other questions? Dr. Lund? There's been a motion to approve Horizon Pool Supplies regenerative media proposal at a cost of $169,550 to the building fund. Is there a second? And second by Mr. Anderson. Any further discussion? We'll take a roll call vote.
Manley?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
Hodak?
Yes.
Clevin?
Yes.
Larson?
Yes.
Palmasino? Flynn? Lund?
Yes.
Berger?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no, 0 absent.
Motion passes. 6H, consideration of SFN 52034 application to Department of Public Instruction for Grand Forks Central Pool recommissioning. This would be Mr. Baumbach.
Yes, President Berger, members of the board, for any project that exceeds a threshold of $150,000, we need to let Department of Public Instruction know that we're doing that and then seek their approval on that. So this is the paperwork to do just that. So the administrative recommendation is to approve the SFN 52304, and then the administration can get that submitted to DPI for their consideration.
Any questions for Mr. Baumbach? So moved. It's been moved by Mr. Clevin to approve SFN 52304 and direct the administration to submit to DPI for consideration. Is there a second? Second. And second by Mr. Larson. Any discussion? We'll take a roll call vote.
Lund?
Yes.
Palmasino?
Yes.
Flynn?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
Clevin?
Yes.
Manley?
Yes.
Larson?
Yes.
Hodak?
Yes.
Berger?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no, 0 absent.
Motion passes. 6I, consideration of building fund use for Grand Forks Central High School pool expansion joints. It's Mr. Elwine.
Thank you, President Berger, for bearing with me. So this is related to our previous discussions about the pool. This is just the first step in recommissioning that pool, which is to replace the expansion joints within and outside of the pool. This came at the recommendation of our experts that we spoke to, including some that bid on this project. And they recommended that we actually pull this out of that scope and bid it separately to prevent markup costs that they would have to charge us. So we talked to a number of firms, and we worked with New Life Restoration to come to a scope and a quote on that, which came out to $10,525. And our administrative recommendation is to approve $10,525 of building fund dollars for the replacement of pool expansion joints at Central High School. I will stand for any questions.
Questions for Mr. Elwine? Seeing none, I'd seek a motion to approve $10,525 of building fund dollars for the replacement of pool expansion joints at Central High School. It's been moved by Dr. Hodak, second by Mr. Manley. Any discussion? We'll take a roll call vote.
Hodak? Yes. Clevin?
Yes.
Manley?
Yes.
Larson?
Yes.
Flynn?
Yes.
Lund?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
Palmasino? Berger?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no, 0 absent.
Motion passes. Item 7A, announcements. Are there any announcements from board members, staff, administration? Anything for the good of the whole? 7B, board requests for future consideration. Any requests from board members? 7C, school board meeting norms. Mr. Larson, how did we do? Your microphone.
Other than me cursing at Amber inside for having 6 questions, we did very well.
Thank you very much. We are adjourned.